So maybe just to get us started, and again, kind of keeping each of yourselves anonymous, if we could just go around the table here and have each of you just give a high-level overview about your current roles and responsibilities at your organization. Again, just keeping yourself anonymous. So maybe, Fred, we start with you.
Sure. Can you hear me okay?
Yep.
Yeah. Medical director working as a consultant with a regional plan right now. Responsibilities are primarily in the area of oncology and oncology therapeutics, oncology management programs, and formulary drug selection, and development of the utilization policies around those products, and also in terms of network relationships with oncology providers really throughout the whole network.
Perfect. Art, we'll go up to you.
So pharmacy director, regional MCO, Medicare commercial lives, primary responsibilities, formulary management, so you run the P&T. Also involved in developing and implementing clinical programs, so things like prior auth, step edits, benefit design, and contracting.
Perfect. And Donald?
Yeah, pharmacy director in a health plan managed care organization that also has a delivery system associated with it, and focus on formulary management, benefit administration. We do have an outcomes research group, and we are, have multiple hospitals and medical offices in terms of care delivery.
Want to hear about what some of the high-level discussions you've been having and what are some of the concerns that the health plan has been working through. So Fred, maybe we start with you again.
Sure, that would be fine. I would probably not product specific, but a lot of energy, a lot of focus on shifting all the models of reimbursement to more value-based models, particularly the professional and the hospital contracts. So increasingly, the physician reimbursement is being, incrementally moved away from just traditional fee for codes that are billed. Likewise, hospital reimbursement, and in all of that is an increasing, very slow but very gradual transfer of risk to those provider and hospital contracts. Right now, that risk is around total cost of care, and that's in both professional and hospital contracts. And of course, that would include pharmaceutical costs of care. But that's just a steady road, and I see that it takes a lot of effort right now, and I see over the next, 1 to 2 years, steady progress in that area. So that's clearly the primary focus right now, and then everything else. I would say number 2 would probably be government regulations. It's so fluid in terms of what the ACA regulations are going to do, and particularly at the state level here in terms of the Medicaid expansion, which is a fairly large block of individuals. So all the uncertainty around that consumes a lot of energy as well. But I'd say those would be the 2 things, Andrew. It would be the steady progressive migration of contracts to value-based payment and risk sharing, and then secondly, the evolution of the government program.
Got it. And Fred, just one follow-up on that. I know that you may not be the guy doing the contracting, but my kind of knowledge around this is that when you renegotiate those contracts with the hospital, that can certainly be a lot of back and forth can be involved with that. A lot of tit for tat. I'll give you this, you give me that. I guess what's from kind of what you've been able to see from the periphery, how have those negotiations been going? Have the hospitals been kind of pushing back on some of the renegotiated rates, or what's been the experience?
That's actually gone fairly smoothly. Now, remember, I said it's incremental, so we're still talking a small percentage of total reimbursement, but that increases every year. It's been a very collaborative process, and the hospitals have largely been on board. I mean, they realize that the model is changing, particularly, a great case point when these extremely expensive drugs come out. Everybody realized that you need a new model of reimbursement. So, it's not to say that there's individual negotiations that are somewhat problematic, but I think given the collaborative approach, everybody's been quite pleased about how smoothly it's been going.
Okay. Perfect. Art, maybe we jump up to you. Things keeping you and your plan up at night?
Well, I mean, you brought up a few of the issues already. I mean, with the advent of some of these gene therapies and these one-time sort of fixes per se, the reimbursement models are something that we're having quite a few discussions on, especially with the upfront, the one-time huge upfront payment. Combination oncology products is something else that we're keeping an eye on because we're seeing an increased use of those. And orphan drugs. To be quite honest with you, that market has kind of exploded per se. It seems like every week there's a new orphan disease that I'm learning about with one or multiple orphan drugs that are being studied for it. And then when you put all these orphan drugs together, it's having a pretty big impact on the budget. So, but then the typical categories, oncology, MS, RA, all those things are always going to be sort of at the top of the list as well.
Yep. So when you think about just your budgets, is orphan drugs its own category, meaning it's oncology, RA, severe asthma, and then orphan drugs?
Yeah. So if it's an oncology indication, I would say it's probably under the oncology bucket. But when you're looking at amyloidosis and you're looking at hemophilia, you're looking at PAH and cystic fibrosis, we tend to put all those in, quote unquote orphan disease bucket per se.
Yeah. Got it. Okay. And I don't want to jump ahead too far because I do have this as a question and category later. But what's sort of been the initial thoughts from the health plan on the one-time payment model, meaning, versus kind of spreading it out over 3 years or something like that, your payment plan?
Right. So right now we're not set out to spread it out over 3 years. So I mean, if we happen to get a Luxturna, I mean, we're going to have to, reimburse it because we're not really set up to do any sort of as, what you said, annuitized payments or anything like that. You are seeing some manufacturers, though, sort of compensate for that by offering more of a value-based reimbursement themselves, risk sharing, something like that. But, I mean, fortunately, we haven't had the issue yet where one of these have come up. I think we've had a couple claims for the CAR-Ts, but nothing with respect to, like, Luxturna or anything yet. Yeah, I don't know. I mean, I think, from my perspective, if we got a claim today for Luxturna, we're going to have to pay for it up front. I mean, there's really no other way for us to do it right now.
Yeah. And then I guess last question is, and this is kind of expanding out in the future, but, you have a hypothetical hemophilia A gene therapy that can eliminate factor for years and years and years. So you're not talking, $850, $875, you're talking multi-million-dollar potentially for that type of product. Will it be the same? Okay. I guess does the pressure build on trying to figure out a mechanism, to be able to do the payment model, or is it still just the system and the way that works?
Yeah, I mean, there's a pressure to be able to figure out a better way of doing it. I'm not sure what that payment model will be, but there is definitely discussions about what other options we would have. Right? If we knew for sure that a CAR-T was a cure, I think we'd be less concerned about paying for that one-time upfront payment. I think the issue is we don't know, right? We don't know how long Luxturna is going to work. We don't know how long a gene therapy in hemophilia is going to prevent the need for a factor product. That's the issue more so than the payment is. We don't know how long that clinical benefit is going to last.
Right. Okay. And then, Donald, what's keeping you up at night in your plan?
Yeah, as a pharmacy director, I'd say it's in some ways very similar to Art's comments. From a P&T committee perspective, it's the issue of combination oncology, the rare disease issues that seem to come up routinely now. We haven't had a Luxturna patient. We've had a few Chimera patients. The issue of paying up front, for those products, we are paying up front. And similar to ART, we don't really have a mechanism in place to spread that out over 3 years. We could conceivably come up with that at some point if we had to, but it's not an urgent issue. And in fact, the finance people have said, well, rather than spread it out over 3 years, we'll just take a discount. We'd rather take that 7% off and pay it up front rather than spread it out over 3 years in an annuity. So we have very similar types of interactions internally. We do track the rare disease drugs kind of in their own category, even though therapeutically they're all over the board. So similar to ART, oncology remains in oncology, even the rare oncology indications. But a lot of the other rare diseases we've kind of aggregated to make it easier for finance and actuary to track separately in the therapeutic categories. Otherwise, they sometimes get a little bit buried in the details. And I would say those are the primary things that are keeping us up. With Fred's comments around pay for performance or kind of risk sharing with the provider group, we're set up to do that. In the sense, my health plan capitates our delivery system. So we've been doing that for many, many years. And the delivery system has to perform based on budgeted capitated models rather than a claims-based system, given how we're organized from a business perspective.
Got it. Okay. Perfect. Thanks, Donald. Fred, just back to you on some of these comments. I know you had mentioned kind of focusing on oncology specifically within your role. The two comments above about worry around combination oncology specifically, just how is your health plan thinking about that? Is it, if it's FDA approved, we have to cover this? Is it trying to maybe require a monotherapy before the combination, depending on the clinical data? Have you had any specific discussions or talks around combination specifically?
Yeah, certainly it is a hot topic to say the least, and it's becoming more acute as more combinations are approved. I think melanoma is a classic example where there's now 3 brand combinations of the BRAF inhibitors. So it is definitely an issue. It's, on the other hand, nothing new, and oncology combination therapy has been the standard for a long, long time. So there's been no example I can think of where just simply because it's an expensive combination, we've required a single drug first. Pretty much it's all followed the label indication. So I think the bottom line is it's an area of intense interest, following it closely. It hasn't led to specific changes in management approach so far, but I think it's only going to get more intense.
Yeah. I guess, do any of you see, P&T looking at 2 different products? One is a monotherapy that provides, let's say hypothetically 5 months of survival, and the combination provides 6 months of survival, where the combination is providing a benefit, but you're sitting around P&T and going, is this benefit warranted for us to kind of pay the additional costs for the combination? Do you think that those discussions will take place at P&T, meaning you will ever kind of even consider going to a monotherapy first?
Right now, this is Art. Right now, we don't. I mean, the way we manage these oncology products is through FDA-approved indication as well as NCCN compendia. Regarding the combination, I'm not sure that we would say, let's start with the monotherapy first and then progress to combo. It's trying to identify the appropriate patient that would benefit from that combination therapy versus the monotherapy. And right now, we're relying on the guidelines. We're relying on our KOLs. We're relying on NCCN. But if it's got the approval and it's got the indication, right now we'll provide access to it. I mean, our concern really is combination use of products where there's no data to support it. Because before, each drug had its own policy. So if you had product X and you met the PA criteria for it, you can get it. And then 3 days later, if they submitted a request for product Y and you met the PA criteria for that, you got that as well. We weren't really tracking whether they were using in combination. Now we sort of, if we know that certain products have a tendency to be used in combination, we'll ask the question, is this intended to be used in combination with product Y? And then we now try to identify if that's the appropriate patient based on that, asking that additional question. But if it's FDA approved or within compendia, you know, we're not forcing somebody to go to a monotherapy first.
Okay. Donald or Fred, any additional thoughts on your management there?
No, I see it similar to Art, and our approach is similar. I do think, especially with cancer, it's FDA indication. It would be compendia, and that, you know, we won't micromanage, you know, if it's single drug versus combination drug. It's going to be left up to that treating clinician, and there may be incremental improvements, as you say, 5 months versus 6 months, but that's a decision that we still leave up to the clinician with, you know, of course, the discussion with the patient.
Okay.
Yeah, I would add to that is it's interesting that often the clinicians prefer the monotherapy. We actually see that a little more often than you might guess. It's easier. I think there's, you know, compliance issues and those types of things and cost issues that they're aware of as well. So, again, in the melanoma example, I think that there seems to be a preference, if possible, to use a single agent like pembro. But, you know, when the clinical circumstance so dictates, then we rely on the combination, and it's certainly covered by the health plan.